The idea of a yana, or vehicle, comes from the basic notion or image of Buddhism as a raft for crossing a river. This shore is ordinary everyday consciousness, such as we have mainly the consciousness of being an ego or a sensitive mind locked up inside a mortal body. A consciousness of being you in particular and nobody else. The other shore is release, or nirvana, a word which means literally blow out. As one says, whew, in heaving a sigh of relief. Nirvana is never, never, never to be interpreted as a state of extinction or a kind of consciousness in which you are absorbed into an infinitely formless, luminous ocean which could best be described as purple jello, but luminous, kind of spiritual horrors. It isn't meant to be that at all. Nirvana has many senses, but the primary meaning of it is that it's this everyday life, just as we have it now, but seen and understood and felt in a very, very different way. Buddhism is called in general a dharma, and this word is often mistranslated as the law. It's better translated as the doctrine, and still better translated as the method. And the Dharma is formulated originally by the Buddha, who was the son of a North Indian Raja living very close to Nepal, who was thriving shortly after 600 BC. The word Buddha is a title. The proper name of this individual was Gautama Siddhartha, and the word Buddha means the awakened one, from the Sanskrit root Buddh, B-U-D-H, which means to wake or to know. So we could say Buddha means the man who woke up. And the Buddha was a very, very skillful psychologist. He is, in a way, the first psychotherapist in history. A man of tremendous understanding of the wiles and deviousnesses of the human mind. Buddhism is made to be easily understood. Everything is numbered so that you can remember it. And the basis of Buddhism are what are called the Four Noble Truths. The first one is the truth about suffering. The second, the truth about the cause of suffering. The third, the truth about the ceasing of suffering. And the fourth, the truth about the way to the ceasing of suffering. So let's go back to the beginning. Suffering. The Sanskrit word is dukkha, D-U-H-K-H-A, dukkha. It means suffering in the widest possible sense, but chronic suffering, chronic frustration is probably as good a translation as any. Chronic frustration. And the Buddhism says the life of mankind and of animals, indeed also of angels, if you believe in angels, is characterized by chronic frustration. And so that constitutes a problem. If any one of you says, I have a problem, I don't suppose you would be here if you didn't in some way have a problem. Well, that's dukkha. Now, the next thing is the cause of it. The cause of it is called Trishna. T-R-I-S-H-N-A. Trishna is a Sanskrit word that is the root of our word thirst. Thirst, but more exactly, craving or clutching or desiring. Because of craving or of clutching, in us we create suffering. But in turn, this second truth includes that behind Trishna there lies another thing called ignorance, avidya, A-V-I-D-Y-A. Non-vision. You see, vidya, vid in Sanskrit, is the root of the Latin video and of our vision. And in front of the word is non. As we say, atheist is a non-theist. So avidya is not seeing. Ignorance, or better, ignorance. Because our mind, as it functions consciously, is a method of attending to different and particular areas of experience, one after another, one at a time. When you focus your consciousness on a particular area, you ignore everything else. That is why to know is at the same time to ignore. And because of that, there arises Trishna or craving. Why? Because if you ignore what you really know, you come to imagine that you are separate from the rest of the universe, and that you are alone. And therefore you begin to crave, to thirst for, you develop an anxiety to survive. Because you think that if you're separate, if you're not the whole works, you're going to die. Actually, you're not going to die at all. You're simply going to stop doing one thing and start doing something else. You know, when you die, in the ordinary way, you just stop doing this thing called Alan Watts. But you do something else. Later, man, you know, like that. And it's nothing to worry about at all. Only if you are entirely locked up in the illusion that you're only this, then you begin to be frightened and anxious. And that creates thirst. So if you can get rid of ignorance, and widen your mind out so as to see the other side of the picture, then you can stop craving. That doesn't mean to say you won't enjoy your dinner anymore, and that it won't be nice to make love to girls or anything like that. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that enjoying your dinner and making love and generally enjoying the senses and all the experience, that only becomes an obstacle to you if you cling to that in order to save yourself. But if you don't need to save yourself, you can enjoy life just as much as ever. You don't have to be a Puritan. So then that state of letting go, instead of clinging to everything, supposing you know you're in business and you have to make money and keep a family supported or something like that, you know. The thing is, do that, but don't let it get you down. Do it in what the Hindus call nishkama karma. Nishkama means passionless karma activity. And that means doing all the things that one would do in life, one's business, one's occupation, etc., etc. But doing it without taking it seriously. Do it as a game. And then everybody who depends on you will like it much better, Because if you take it seriously, they'll be feeling guilty, because they'll say, oh dear, Papa absolutely knocks himself out to work for us, you see. And they all get miserable. And they go on, they live their lives out of a sense of duty, which is a dreadful thing to do. So that's nirvana, you see, to live in a let-go way. Then the fourth noble truth describes the way, the method of realizing nirvana. And that's called the Noble Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is a series of 8 human activities, such as understanding or view, effort, vocation or occupation, speaking, conduct, etc. And they're all prefaced by the Sanskrit word samyak, which is very difficult to translate. Most people translate it right, in the sense of correct. But this is an incomplete translation. The word sam, the root sam, in Sanskrit is the same as our word sum, through the Latin summa. And sum, of course, the sum of things means completion. But it also has the sense of balanced, or middle weighed. Not W-E-I-G-H, but W-A-Y-E-D, middle weighed. Because Buddhism is called the middle way. And we'll find out a great deal about that later. But the thing that you must recognize is this. Buddhism, although when you say right speech, in other words, don't tell lies, well, let me put it this way. Every Buddhist who belongs to the Theravada school in the South expresses the fact that he is a Buddhist by reciting a certain formula. And it's called Tisarana and Panchasila. This is, I'm talking Pali now, not Sanskrit. Tisarana means the 3 refuges, Panchasila, the 5 precepts. And they put your hands together like this and say, Buddhang saranang gacchami, Danghang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. That means, I take refuge in Buddha, I take refuge in the method, the Dhamma, I take refuge in the Sangha, which means the fraternity of the followers of Buddha. And then he goes on and he takes the 5 precepts. Panatipata veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. And this precepts one after another. I promise to abstain from taking life. Adina dana veramani. I promise to abstain from taking what is not given. Kamesu mityahara. I promise to abstain from exploiting my passions. Musavada veramani, I promise to abstain from false speech. Sura merya madhyapamadhatana, I promise to abstain from getting intoxicated by a list of various boozes. Now, this every Buddhist in the Southern School says. Mahayanists have a different formula. Well, this is the method, and the method, the Dharma, is therefore a moral law, just like the 10 Commandments. But it isn't. It's nothing, it's quite different. You see, you don't take the 5 precepts in obedience to a royal edict. You take them upon yourself, and there is a very special reason for doing so. How can you fulfill the precept not to take life? Every day you eat, even if you're a vegetarian, you must take life. And so on. Now, therefore, understand this, and this is absolutely fundamental to an understanding of Buddhism. Buddhism is a method, it is not a doctrine. Buddhism is a dialogue, and what it states at the beginning is not necessarily what it would state at the end. The method of Buddhism is, first of all, a relationship between a teacher and a student. The student creates the teacher by raising a problem and going to someone about it. You see? Now, if he chooses wisely, you see, he'll find this, if there's a Buddha around to use as the teacher. And then he says to the Buddha, my problem is that I suffer. And I want to escape from suffering. So the Buddha replies, suffering is caused by desire, by trishna, by craving. If you can stop desiring, then you will solve your problem. Go away and try to stop desiring. And he gives him some methods how to practice meditation and to make his mind calm and still to see if he can stop desiring. The student goes away and practices this. Then he comes back to the teacher and says, but I can't stop desiring not to desire. What am I to do about that? So the teacher says, try then to stop desiring not to desire. Now, you can see where this is going to land up. Or he might put it in this way. All right, if you can't completely stop desiring, do a middle way. That is to say, stop desiring as much as you can stop desiring. And don't desire to stop any more desire than you can stop. See where that's going to go? Because he keeps coming back. Because what the teacher has done in saying stop desiring, he has given his student what in Zen Buddhism is called a koan. This is a Japanese word that means a meditation problem, or more strictly, it means the same thing as case means in law, because koans are usually based on anecdotes and incidents of the old masters, cases, precedents. But koan, the function of a koan, is a challenge for meditation. Well, who is it that desires not to desire? Who is it that wants to escape from suffering? And here we get to a methodological difference between Hinduism and Buddhism on the question of who are you? The Hindu says, you, yourself, he calls Atman, A-T-M-A-N, the self. And he says now, strive to know the self. Realize I am not my body because I can be aware of my body. I am not my thoughts because I can be aware of my thoughts. I am not my feelings for the same reason. I am not my mind, etc., because I can be aware of it. Therefore, I really am other than, above, transcending all these finite aspects of me. Now, the Buddhist has a critique of that. He says, why do you try to escape from yourself as a body? The reason is your body falls apart and you want to escape from it. Why do you want to disidentify yourself from your emotions? The reason is that your emotions are uncomfortable and you want to escape from them. You don't want to have to be afraid. You don't want to have to be in grief or anger. And love even is too much, you see. It involves you in suffering, because if you love someone, you have a hostage to fortune. So the Buddhist says the reason why you believe you are the Atman, the eternal self, which in turn is the Brahman, the self of the whole universe, is that you don't want to lose your damn ego. And if you can fix your ego and put it in the safe deposit box of the Lord, you think you've still got yourself. You haven't really let go. So the Buddha said there isn't any Atman. He taught the doctrine of an-Atman, non-self. Your ego is unreal, and as a matter of fact, there's nothing you can cling to. No refuge, really. Just let go, man. There's no salvation, no safety, nothing anywhere, you see. How clever that was, you see. Because what he was really saying is, any Atman that you could cling to or think about or believe in wouldn't be the real one. This is the accurate sense of the original documents of the Buddha's teaching. If you carefully go through it, that's what he's saying. He's not saying that there isn't the Atman or the Brahman. He says anyone you could conceive wouldn't be it. Anyone you believed in would be the wrong one. Because believing is clinging still. It isn't, there's no salvation through believing. There's only salvation through knowledge. And even then, the highest knowledge is non-knowledge. And here he agrees with the Hindus who say in the Upanishads, in the Kena Upanishad, if you think that you know Brahman, you do not know him. But if you know that you do not know the Brahman, you truly know. Why? Well, that's very simple. If you really are it, you don't need to believe in it. And you don't need to know it, just as your eyes don't need to look at themselves. You see? So that's the difference of method in Buddhism. Now understand method here. The method is a dialogue. And the so-called teachings of Buddhism are the first opening gambits in the dialogue. And when they say you cannot understand Buddhism out of books, the reason is that the books only give you the opening gambits. Then, having read the book, you have to go on with the method. Now, you can go on with the method without a formal teacher. That is to say, you can conduct the dialogue with yourself or with life. You have to explore and experiment on such things as, could one possibly not desire? Could one possibly concentrate the mind perfectly? Could one possibly do this, that, and the other? And you have to work with it, you see, so that you understand the later things that come after trying these experiments. These later things are the heart of Buddhism. So then, shortly after the Buddha's time, the practice of Buddhism continued as a tremendous ongoing dialogue among the various followers. And eventually they established great universities, such as there was at a place called Nalanda in northern India. This discourse was going on, and if you looked at it superficially, you might think it was nothing but an extremely intellectual bull session, where philosophers were outwitting each other. Actually, the process that was going on was this: that the teacher or guru in every case was examining students as to their beliefs and theories and destroying their beliefs. Showing that any belief that you would propose, any idea about yourself or about the universe that you want to cling to and make something of, used for a crutch, a prop, a security, the teacher demolishes it. This is how the dialogue works, until you are left with not a thing to hang on to. Any religion you might propose, even atheism, they'll tear up. Agnosticism, they'll destroy. Any kind of belief, they're experts in demolition, so that they finally get you to the point where you've got nothing left to hang on to. Well, then you're free. Because you're it, you see. Once you're hanging on to things, you put it somewhere else, you see, something I can grab. And even when you think as an idea, then I'm it, you're still hanging on to that. They're going to knock that one down. So when you are left without anything at all, you've seen the point. Now that's the method of the dialogue, essentially. That is the Dharma. And all Buddhists make jokes about this. Buddha says in the Diamond Sutra, you see, when I attained complete, perfect, unsurpassed awakening, I didn't attain anything. Because it's like, to use a metaphor that is used in the scriptures, it's like using an empty fist to deceive a child. So you say to a child, what have I got here? The child gets interested immediately and wants to find out. You hide it, and the child climbs all over you, can't get at your fist. And finally, you do let him get it, and there's nothing in it. Many of the problems that are now being discussed by modern logicians are, unbeknownst to them, already in the ancient Indian books. Problems of semantics, problems of meaning, problems of the nature of time and of memory. All these were discussed with very, very meticulous scholarly sophistication. So that it is my opinion that this was a very, very fertile period of human history, and that the philosophy in which it eventually emerged, the philosophy of Mahayana Buddhism, is as yet the most mature and really intelligent theory of human life and of the cosmos that man has ever devised. It is characteristic of this point of view that it adheres to the middle way. And the middle way doesn't mean moderation. It means the bringing together of opposites, of what we might call in our world spirit and matter, mind and body, mysticism and sensuality, unity and multiplicity, conformity and individualism. All these things are marvelously wedded together in the worldview of Mahayana. And fundamental to Mahayana Buddhism is the idea of what is called the Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means a person who has as his essence, sattva, bodhi, awakening. And it's usually used to mean a potential Buddha. Someone who is, as it were, just about to become a Buddha. That was the original sense. And so part of the Pali canon is a book called the Jataka Mala, the tales of the Buddha's previous lives. How he behaved when he was an animal. How he behaved when he was a man long before he became Buddha. And in all these stories, he is represented as sacrificing himself for the benefit of other beings. But since he had not yet become a fully fledged Buddha, he's called in these stories a bodhisattva. That really means a potential Buddha. But the point is that as a potential Buddha, as a bodhisattva, he is always involved in situations where he's feeding himself for the hungry tigers and so on. Now, in the course of time, the term bodhisattva underwent a transformation. A bodhisattva matures and becomes a Buddha. And what does that mean popularly? It means that whoever is fully awakened to the way things are is delivered from any necessity to be involved in the world anymore. In other words, you can go onto a transcendent level of being where time is abolished, where all times are now, where there are no problems, where there is perpetual, eternal peace. Nirvana, in the sense of the word parinirvana, means beyond nirvana, super nirvana. So that if you are fed up with this thing, and you don't want to play the game of hide and seek anymore, you can go in the parinirvana state and be in total serenity. However, and again I'm talking the language of popular Buddhism, a person who stands on the threshold of that peace can turn back and say, I won't be a Buddha, I'll be a bodhisattva. I won't make the final attainment because I would like to go back into the world of manifestation they call samsara, go back into that world and work for their liberation. So then, when a Mahayana Buddhist does his formula for puja, you know, he says, sentient beings are numberless. I take a vow to save them. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. Note this, inexhaustible. I take a vow to destroy them. The gates of the method, the Dharma, are manifold. I take a vow to enter them. The Buddha way is supreme. I take a vow to complete it. All this is impossible. You see, numberless sentient beings, because they are numberless, can never be delivered. Deluding passions which are inexhaustible can never be eradicated. So this then, Mahayanist, you know, they go, Shujo mu hen se gan do banno mu jin se gan dan homon muryo se gan gyaku butsudo mujo se gan jo. And that's their formula. The bodhisattva who returns into the world and becomes involved again is in fact regarded as a superior kind of being to the one who gets out of it. The person who gets out of the rat race and enters into eternal peace is called Pratyeka Buddha, which means private Buddha. Buddha who does not teach, who does not help others. And in Mahayana literature, that is almost a term of abuse. Pratyeka Buddha. Pratyeka Buddhas are classed with unbelievers and heretics and infidels and fools. But the great thing is the bodhisattva All beings are thought of in popular Buddhism as constantly reincarnating again and again and again and again into the round of existence, helplessly, because they still desire. They are therefore drawn back into the cycle. The Bodhisattva goes back into the cycle with his eyes wide open, voluntarily, and allows himself to be sucked in. And this is normally interpreted as an act of supreme compassion. And bodhisattvas can assume any guise. They can get furiously angry if necessary in order to discourage evil beings. Even could assume the role of a prostitute and live that way so as to deliver beings at that level of life. Could become an animal, become an insect, become a maggot, anything, all deliberately and in full consciousness to carry on the work of the deliverance of all beings. Now that's the way the popular mind understands it. And therefore the bodhisattvas are all revered and respected and worshipped and looked upon as gods, as we look upon God in the West, and as saviors as the Christian looks upon Jesus. But underneath this myth, there is a profound philosophical idea, and that is this. It goes back to the Hindu philosophy of Advaita or non-duality. Namely, the apparent dualism of I and thou, of the knower and the known, the subject and the object, is unreal. And so also the apparent duality between Maya, the world illusion, and reality is unreal. The apparent duality or difference between the enlightened and the ignorant person is unreal. So the apparent duality of bondage and deliverance or liberation is unreal. The wise, the perfectly wise man is the one who realizes vividly that the ideal place is the place where you are. This is an impossible thing to put in words. The nearest I could get to it would be to say that if you could see this moment, that you need nothing beyond this moment, now, sitting here, irrespective of anything I might be saying to you, of any ideas you might have rattling around in your brains, that here and now is the absolute which than which there is no whicher. Only we prevent ourselves from seeing this because we're always saying, well, there ought to be something more. Amn't I missing something somehow? See? Nobody sees it. Now, then also, the most far-out form of Mahayana Buddhism is called the Pure Land School, Jodo Shinshu. Jodo means pure land, Shinshu, true sect. And this is based on the idea that there was in immeasurably past ages a great bodhisattva called Amitabha. And he made a vow that he would never, never become a Buddha unless any being who repeated his name would automatically, at death, be born into the pure land over which he presides. That is a kind of paradise. He did become a Buddha. And so the vow works. All you have to do is to repeat the name of Amitabha. And this will assure the fact that without any further effort on your part, you will be reborn in his paradise when you die. And in that paradise, becoming a Buddha is a cinch. There are no problems there. the Western paradise, you see, is some kind of a level of consciousness. But it's represented as fact as a glorious place. You can see the pictures of it in Koyasan, wonderful pictures, where the Buddha Amitabha, who is actually a Persian figure, he's related to Ahura Mazda, and he means boundless light. And the Daibuts at Kamakura, that enormous bronze Buddha in the open air, is Amitabha. So there he sits, surrounded with his court. And this court is full of apsaras. And apsaras are beautiful girls, playing lutes. And as you are born into the paradise, what happens when you die is you discover yourself inside a lotus. And the lotus goes pop, and there you find yourself sitting, coming out of the water. And here on the clouds in front of you are the apsaras sitting, strumming their lutes with the most sensuous, beautiful faces, see? And to get this, all you have to do is say the name of Amitabha. The formula is Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. And you can get this fast. Say it many times, you see. So you're quite sure it's going to happen. But actually you only have to say it once. And you mustn't make any effort to gain this reward, because that would be spiritual pride. Your karma, you see, your bad deeds, your awful past is so bad that anything good you try to do is done with a selfish motive and therefore doesn't affect your deliverance. Therefore, the only way to get deliverance is to put faith in the power of this Amitabha Buddha and to accept it as a free gift and to take it by doing the most absurd thing, saying Namo Amida Butsu, you see. Don't even worry whether you have to have faith in this, because trying to have faith is also spiritual pride. It doesn't matter whether you have faith or whether you don't. The thing works anyway, so just say Namo Amida Butsu. See? Now that's the most popular form of Buddhism in Asia. The two most vast temples in Kyoto, the Inishi and Higashi Honganji temples, represent this sect. And everybody loves Amitabha. Amida, they call him in Japan. Boundless light, infinite Buddha of compassion. Sitting there with this angelic expression on his face. It's all right, boys, just say my name. It's all you have to do. So when we add together prayer wheels, Namo Amida Butsu, they call it Nembutsu, that's the means of remembering Buddha. Bookcases, and all these things where you just have to and the work is done for you. Then wouldn't we Westerners say, especially if we are Protestants, oh, what a scoundrelly thing that is, what an awful degradation of religion, what an avoidance of the moral challenge and the effort and everything that is required. Is this what the Bodhisattva doctrine of infinite compassion deteriorates into? Now you see, there is a profound aspect to all that. Just as there is the diamond and the ice, as we were talking about this morning, just as there is desperation and despair, nirvana, desperation and despair of the horrors, so there are two ways of looking at this nothing to do, no effort to make idea, depending completely on the Savior. For who is Amitabha? Popularly, Amitabha is somebody else. He is some great compassionate being who looks after you. Esoterically, Amitabha is your own nature. Amitabha is your real self, the inmost boundless light that is the root and ground of your own consciousness. You don't need to do anything to be that. You are that. And saying Nembutsus is simply a symbolical way of pointing out that you don't have to become this, you are it. And Nembutsu, therefore, on its deeper side, builds up a special kind of sage, which they call Myokonin. Myokonin in Japanese means a marvelous fine man. But the Myokonin is a special type of personality who corresponds in the West to the Holy Fool in Russian spirituality, or to something like the Franciscan in Catholic spirituality. Myokonins, well, I'll tell you some Myokonin stories. That's the best way to indicate their character. One day a Myokonin was traveling and he stopped in a Buddhist temple overnight, and he went up to the sanctuary where they have all these big cushions, like here, you know, for the priest to sit on, and he arranged the cushions in a pile on the floor and went to sleep on them. In the morning, the priest came in and saw this tramp sleeping. He said, "What are you doing here, desecrating the sanctuary by sleeping on the cushions and so on, right in front of the altar?" And the Myokonin looked at him in astonishment and said, "Why, you must be a stranger here. You can't belong to the family." In Japanese, when you want to say that a thing is just the way it is, you call it sonomama. So there's a haiku poem which says, "Weeds in the rice field, cut them down, sonomama fertilizer." Cut the weeds, leave them exactly where they are, and they become fertilizer. Sonomama. And sonomama means reality, just the way it is, just like that. Now there's an expression, a parallel expression, konomama. Konomama means I just as I am. Just little me, you know, like that, with no frills, no pretense, except that I naturally have some pretense. That's part of konomama. And the Myokonin is the man, you see, who realizes that he, konomama, just as I am Buddha, am delivered by Amitabha, because Amitabha is my real nature. If you really know that, you see, that makes you a Myokonin. But be aware of the fact that you could entirely miss the point and become a monkey instead by saying, I'm all right just as I am, and therefore I'm going to rub it in. And I'm going to be going around parading my unregenerate nature, because this is Buddha too, you see? The fellow who does that doesn't really know that it's okay. He's doing too much. He's coming on too strong. The other people who are always beating themselves, they're doing the opposite error, you see. The middle way, right down the center, is where you don't have to do a thing to justify yourself. And you don't have to justify not justifying yourself, which is the mistake that most beatniks make. They justify not justifying themselves and go too far. So you see there's something quite fascinating and tricky in this doctrine of the great Bodhisattva Amitabha, who saves you just as you are, who delivers you from bondage just as you are, and you only have to say Namo Amida Butsu. Fascinating. But that is the principle of Mahayana. And that is, you see, your acceptance of yourself as you are is the same thing as coming to live now as you are. You see, now is as you are, in the moment. But you can't come to now, and you can't accept yourself on purpose. Because the moment you do that, you're doing something unnecessary. You're doing a little bit more. That's what they call in Zen legs on a snake, or a beard on a eunuch. You've overdone it, you see. How can you neither do something about it, nor do nothing about it as if that was something you had to do? You see? This is the same problem as originally posed in Buddhism. How do you cease from desiring? Because when I try to cease from desiring, I'm desiring not to desire. You see this? All of this is what is called upaya, or skillful device, to slow you down so that you can really be here. By seeing that there is nowhere else you can be, you don't have to come to now. Where else can you be? It isn't a task. It isn't a contest. What the Greeks called agon, agony, a contest. There's nowhere else to be. So they say, nirvana is no other than samsara. This shore is really the same as the other shore. It's not so if you look for this, Lankavatara Sutra says, if you look to try and get nirvana in order to escape suffering and being reborn, that's not nirvana at all.